work at, thanks, Emily. And we are going to record this here this evening, folks, just so that other people are going to be able to view it later. Kind of general webinar format. We'll go through some stuffs and then we'll open it up to Q&A and we can kind of take this wherever we'd like to tonight. So my name is Mason Levitt. I work for Beyond Toxics as a GIS analyst and programs coordinator. That means that I work a lot with spatial data, which we're going to see a whole lot more of this evening. And I also work a lot on our solid waste programs as sort of the program coordinator half of my job. So a little bit of a new domain for me, but something we've been working on the back end for a while at the organization over the last couple of years. And Joanna, could you introduce yourself?
So my name is Joanna Merson, and I work here at the University of Oregon in what's called the Infographics Lab. So we are a cartography um, lab that has been with the university for over 35 years. This has been at the cutting edge of GI science, which is geographic information systems, mapping, how to make maps and do data storytelling, as I said, for about 35 years. If you are someone from the area, you might be familiar with the Atlas of Oregon. A couple of editions of that print book have come out of the lab, as well as other work that has migrated more on the web as well. So we are a design and practice facility with a large focus on the experiential learning of the students that work here in the lab and contribute to the projects, including the one that we're going to take a look at today. And that's a little bit about the background of the lab itself.
Great, wonderful. So, yeah, let's get a little bit into the data and what we're going to be talking about here this evening. As many of you in the chat probably may or probably know, but maybe some of you are not familiar, Beyond Toxics has released a, get this set up. Hopefully you can see me floating in the corner of your screen. We have released a web map of all pesticide applications that have taken place in Oregon over the last 10 years. And it's pretty simple to navigate to. You just go to beyondtoxics.org. You can see I've been visiting it a lot because it is the first result that comes up for me, but we'll just pretend like we're navigating there. Um, and then you can go to our work under pesticides and communities and find the FERNS Pesticide Webmap. And this is what we've been working on so hard over the last few years and what we're going to talk a lot about here tonight. Um, so obviously pesticides are a hugely critical and important issue to a lot of Oregonians in regards to toxics exposure and environmental health. Many communities are located in watersheds that depend on their water quality being actively maintained and kept contaminant free. And pesticides present a great challenge for that, particularly for our coastal communities as well as those in the Cascades and other forests in Oregon. This is also a measure of concern to a number of folks, not only through their water, but also through their air quality, through pesticide drift when pesticides are deposited, particularly by air, including helicopters and drones. And those chemicals end up in all sorts of places that we do not want them to end up. Pesticides, depending on the particular chemical itself, is occasionally carcinogenic, causes cancer. It's a neurotoxin. It causes damage to our brains, to development, to your gut, and any measure of our bodily systems, depending on the particular constituent. So this has been an issue that folks have cared about for a really long time in Oregon, and Beyond Toxics has been involved in for a really long time. And this need has become most apparent to us for a map like this through phone calls that we receive every spring and fall with people, concerned about an aerial spray near their home, their school, their place of work, their place of drinking water, and wanting to know more about what's going on for them. And previously to this, we would spend, you know, uh, at least a half hour, if not a full hour, pouring through this data and trying to provide this information on one-on-one consultations. And we really believe, as part of our mission as an organization, that data needs to be free and publicly available and in the hands of communities who are impacted by toxic decisions such as this. So, Oregon has been keeping track of pesticides applications to state, county, and privately managed forests in Oregon since about 2014, with the creation of what's called the FERNS system. And you'll often hear us refer to this as the FERNS map or the FERNS pesticide map. And FERNS stands for the Forestry Electronic Registration and Notification System. And the whole goal of it is to be able to allow people to register their address and location and let Oregon Department of Forestry know that I'm concerned about the pesticide applications happening in my area. And then as applicators file a pesticide application, they are ideally and hopefully alerted to that. Um, so over the course of the existence of that program since its inception in 2014, the state has been collecting thousands to tens of thousands of records on pesticides applications happening yearly. Um, the lowest amount of those in 2014 was about 300 application, and in more recent years, since 2020, we see about 8,000 applications a year. And that data has had, the spatial data element, which we'll get a lot more into, but that's one of these individual polygons is that spatial data we're concerned about. And then the state had that spatial data and that polygon stored away over here. And then it had everything that you and I would want to know about that data stored separately over here. So the chemical that was applied, the methodology of how that chemical was applied aerially or through ground or some other means, when it was applied, and who's applying it. And all of those questions can be of great importance to many of us. And so that wasn't really accessible, having these two things stored separately. And so over the past 2 years, I've had the pleasure of working with a number of student interns from the University of Oregon's geography department in working to find a way to bring these two data sets together where we can look at the location of where a pesticide application occurs in conjunction with all of the information we need to know about that. Um, we've worked on that for about the past 2 years, and we wrapped up that data, what we call data cleaning, in about June this year. And that's when we started to work with the infographics lab, because it's really important to us at Beyond Toxics that not only am I someone who's highly trained in GIS data analysis, able to have access to and look at this data and comprehend it and understand it, but also other members of our staff. And most importantly, everyone in the general public. And this is, why we chose to work with Infographics Lab, because this is exactly their specialty and what they aim to do. And we've known them for a while and really wanted to work with them on this. So I'm going to turn it over for a second to Joanna, who's going to walk through a little bit more about Infographics Lab, what they do, and how they worked on this map. And then I'm going to go into a little bit more of an in-depth tutorial on how to use this resource. And then we'll jump into the conversation around how we plan to iterate on this resource into the future and conduct other larger scale analyses around forestry and pesticide data. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a second and pass this over to Joanna. And you are muted. No worries.
Thank you. And I did that to make sure that you didn't get any background noises. Um, so I do have just a little bit to share here for um, just a moment. So hopefully you are seeing my, I just get a confirmation from Mason. Great. When I was introducing the lab before, you can always visit us at infographics.uoregon.edu to see an extent of what some of the different maps that we work on may look like. And one of the things um, that we like to share is our sort of catch phrase that we have here in the infographics lab: design data difference, showing across the top, or data design difference. We were really about helping our partners understand their data, sometimes help clean their data. It was amazing to work with a group like Beyond Toxics, where Mason and his team have already gone through to clean data and understand what it looks like to have good clean data. And then we try and bring that design element into helping that data become accessible. To people with that design expertise and that storytelling expertise. And we really like to work on projects with a difference. And so getting the opportunity to work on this was awesome, because we really do think that this is an opportunity to make a difference in our community. So coming over to the site here, um, what I want to show is one of the great things that we have. It should allow you, when you open it up, you can orient yourself right here in Oregon. And what I am going to do is click on this button down below to just absolutely fill the screen as much as possible with the map, because that's I think how maps should be. I would do full screen map on my background map if I could, but that's printed. So nice thing about the web is we have this interactive environment. Um, so what we have starting here is hopefully we've made it so that the information that really pops to your attention are these little orange dots here. And what these are is revealing to you that spatial information of all those records that Mason and his team were able to, what we would call geocode, make it spatial. And then what we've started to do is add a little bit more of interaction to the map. So this isn't just Google Maps, right? Where basically you're looking at streets and roads and navigation and maybe a little bit of Google advertising to the businesses that they prioritize. So you should be able to find yourself here in Oregon, and we've made it so you can't escape. You can't get too much further than I scrolled away, so we've limited this to allow you to interact with our area of interest. The ways that you can navigate are classic scroll to zoom, and if with your mouse, and if you've got any other um, interactions, we have just kind of you can zoom on the center. That should work if you want to use the zoom buttons. With that, we do have the ability then to see where you are. I know that once you get really in close, especially if you're in an area that you're not as familiar with, without having the really Google Maps highway-centric view, it's not always obvious where you are. And we've really made, for example, up by Corvallis, the H.J. Andrews Experimental Forest, pretty subtle, right? We're not showing the land cover there. So for you to see where you are in the state, we've got the county boundaries and this little inset map. And we actually had some fun here and made that zoomable or pannable. So you can even pan that little box around. The shape and size of it, or the shape of it's going to depend a little bit on your screen. So mine's a pretty rectangle there. So there's multiple ways that you can navigate through your mouse and through clicking. Um, Mason did mention another interesting thing about this is the goal of this for people to be able to know what's near their homes. So we do have this search that allows you to put in a location. If I start typing in SP for Springfield, we're going to get Springfield, United States here, and we can jump to Springfield. Not a lot going on there, I know, because it's a very urban area. So I thought I would actually use an example and put in an address. So I'm going to put in, I looked up just an address near Tillamook because I thought I saw someone who was kind of on the coast. So I started typing in 6615 Brickyard, Oregon. It's a valid address. So this should help you autocomplete to yours or some that you might know near you. So when you hit once you enter an address, wherever that might be, you get a little pin just confirming that you're at that address you searched for, and it'll fly you there. We have the little inset showing where we ended up, so hopefully that's where you were expecting to go. And then you can see the records that were nearby. So that does show you what the uh, property boundaries are, which I think Mason's going to might t talk a little bit more about that these are property boundaries as opposed to exactly where, a spray is at the edge of. But we've got those property boundaries nearby. And you can see as you hover on them that they start to highlight. What's interesting to note is they're a little bit darker, they're transparent where they're overlapping. So we can actually see that there's a couple here that are near each other and then that are also darker where they're overlapping. So if I were to click on one of these sprays, and I'm going to pick an overlapping one, on purpose. This starts to show some more of the pane and some highlighting that we have to help show what's being selected there. And I think that's kind of a lot of the interaction that I'm going to show. Just to also let you know that what we do is we think a lot about design. And so on purpose, really, we really have that point is going to stay there until you clear it away. And all of your normal urban features, everything is really grayscale and pale and subtle in the background. So hopefully you can still, give us any feedback, but hopefully you can still navigate in the background without that really interrupting the information that we're actually here to see, and as well as how you can actually change and view what's available here. I think Mason is going to demo how all those different filters work and what it looks like to dig into the data.
Thank you so much, Joanna. Yeah, let's hop right back into it. So again, we're back here. I'm gonna find that full view map full screen button. We'll see if we can't make that a little bit bigger in the future, but for now it's a little subtle and you gotta look for it. And yeah, so really what we wanted this map to be able to do is be, pretty multifunctional for people. And as Joanna just went over, being able to dive into a specific location that's important to you and see what's been happening around you for the last 10 years can be really insightful. But the other and sort of the other, avenues of exploration that we were trying to picture and allow people to do is just get a general idea of, I think the sheer quantity and capaciousness of pesticide applications all over Oregon. So you can see that there are just tons and tons and tons of these over the last 10 years. And it's a really overwhelming amount of data to sift through. While we're at it, a little side note, you'll also notice that we have our federal lands highlighted here. We have national forests, we have wildlife refuges, we have our national park here, and we have BLM land highlighted. And the reason why we have this highlighted is because pesticide applications do occur there. FERNS just doesn't keep track of it, and the federal government has their own tracking system. Maybe that's something that we as an organization can look into adding to this map in the future. The other thing you'll notice is there's none for agricultural lands down here in the Willamette Valley. There are a couple here and there. They're definitely worth looking into and figuring out, why this is tracked by ferns and why not. But for the most part, these should relate only to Oregon's forests. And diving back into the functionality component of it, let's head over here to the Umpqua River. And right, we can see there's a lot of information. And we recognize that there's going to be a wide amount of inquiry that's related to this. So one of the things that you might be interested in doing is only looking at the last year, right? And so you can use these sliders on this slide scale to be able to filter to specific years or show all of it. So let's say we're only interested in 2024 sprays. And we've now filtered the data to only show sprays from the year of 2024. And let's say I'm really interested in the different types of spray applications that have been going around. So right now I can see that there are aerial, there's ground sprays, there's other types of sprays, and there's no data. And there were a couple that just didn't have something marked. And so I can filter for any one of those in particular. I could say I'm most interested in aerial, or I could set it to where they're all on and then hit this symbology button, and you'll notice that the color of the sprays have changed to match how they're applied. So we can see our aerial ones in pink, we can see our ground ones in purple. We might be able to find an other application. It looks like there's one right here hidden under that purple polygon. Although I suspect that is a no data application. Yeah, check that out. No data. Um, so you can pan around these maps and see if you can find an other application yourself. Oop, there's one actually. This was looks like a spelling error on the part of Oregon Department of Forestry. And we're going to return to some limitations on this data in just a second, but this is a really excellent example of some of the types of limitations we're going to see. But first, we're going to finish exploring kind of all of the different functionality. So I'm going to turn that symbology one back off because I just want to view it as a whole. And let's say I am really interested in just aerial sprays. So I'm going to keep that checked. And then you'll notice that we have all of these different types of chemicals and active ingredients and adjuvants in here. And you can filter for any of them. And one of the tools that I am just still so excited about being built into here is, let's say I'm really interested in all of the 2,4-D pesticide applications. And you'll notice there's a lot of different ways that 2,4-D is applied with different chemicals and active ingredients, and just the way they're entered. You'll see this one with, and we don't really have a with. We'll talk more about why that's in there in just a second, but I can turn off the select all. And then what I can do is I can begin to type in 2,4-D, and you'll notice I've limited our chemical list now only to constituents with 2,4-D. And then I'm going to hit select all, and it's going to turn all of these on. And if I clear my filter, you'll notice that none of the ones that were there were turned on. So right now, I'm able to really specifically look at aerial pesticide applications with 2,4-D in them for the year 2024, right? I was able to get very, very, very specific and filter this data, pretty easily. I say pretty easily because if you use GIS software, it's a lot more complicated than this. So hopefully, for you all at home who aren't used to that software, this feels manageable, if only a tiny bit intimidating. And I hope this made it feel a bit easier. Um, and then let's say, I'm getting really annoyed with this federal land. I just want to be able to, oh, there we go. I just want my picture of pesticide applications. And from there, I can really get into this. You can see that an applicator near Scott Mountain clearly has a strong preference towards 2,4-D aerial sprays. And that might be a really important concern for you if you live in this area. And so again, you might be able to search your address and then work backwards from the way we did it. But let's dive into some of these over here. As Joanna mentioned, you can click on it for more information. And you're going to notice that our current application is outlined in black. Whenever I'm hovering off of it, whenever I'm hovering on it, it's outlined in white. And you'll notice that there are two different applications here for this permit. There's this FERNS ID, and then there's this FERNS ID. And I can toggle between the two of them. You'll notice that they're pretty similar, and I would suspect that this was a similar applicator. They just applied for two different methods. You'll notice we have an aerial helicopter spray for 730-04-115, and then we have an aerial other and ground pressurized broadcast and a ground manual spot application for this other application. And you can see the chemicals that were applied. Um, and you can see the time range of this application was for 3 months during the spring in early 2024. And let's say you want to find out a whole lot more. You're going to hit this permit PDF button. And has my shared screen followed?
Still loading.
Still loading? Okay, as long as it's following. This takes a while. This was one of our great joys as data cleaners, was to repeatedly click on these links and then sit here for a little bit while they load. Some of the applications in particular take a long time to load, but all of them are a little bit generally slow. I'm not sure why that is, but it has something to do with the way Oregon Department of Forestry set up their website. So
And
you'll
having zoom
notice,
on may slow it down a little more.
and having zoom on certainly doesn't help. Okay, so in this NOAP, this is the traditional data that many of you might be familiar with and used to accessing. You'll see the different units as a part of this NOAP. So you'll see that there's multiple polygons in here. You'll be able to see who the operator is. You'll be able to see a little bit more, some of the data that we're already familiar with seeing right here. Same here with the methods, and you'll be able to see a general geographic location of this. So this is quite a large uh, notification for ferns. It's not every day that you see one with 31 different units in it. Some of them can be as small as 1 unit, and some of them can be this large. I want to say I've seen a couple with 60. And in fact, if we were to zoom out right here, I'm kind of curious. Never mind. Okay, I don't want to bore you guys with too many GIS details, but it would show up differently if it was a multi-part polygon versus multiple polygons. And I'm getting in the weeds. So I'm going to back off for a second. So I think this really entails the functionality of the website. You can click around and explore and see all of the different pesticide applications. And you are understandably being bombarded with a lot of data here. And I think there are a few important limitations to note and be cognizant of while using this resource and while understanding the nature of this data itself. One, this data is crowdsourced, meaning that if I'm a forester and I'm filing to apply a pesticide, either myself or one of my employees is going to log on to FERNS website by Oregon Department of Forestry and log in and manually submit all of the data on where we're spraying, how much we're spraying, what types of chemicals, and how we're doing it. So this means that this data is only as accurate as the industry self-reports. This is what we're taking at face value. This is what they said they're going to do. And whether or not they followed through with that is not only a question of are they being honest, but it's also a question of modifying the data. So one of the limitations of this that might show up when you're using this website is you might get a specific list of chemicals on this website, but when you go to the PDF, you're going to notice that there are some slight changes. Um, I don't have an example ready for you all tonight, but this is because when you go and enter the data initially, that is the data that is handed to the Oregon Department of Forestry and what goes into the essentially big spreadsheets that Beyond Toxics has been working with. If an operator decides to make a change to what chemicals they're applying, how they're applying it, or what time they're applying it, that change will show up in the PDF itself. However, it will not show up on our end. Um, that is a complaint I have for Oregon Department of Forestry that I eventually hope we're able to get fixed throughout the course of this project and being able to quantify how often this is an issue. But that is a limitation that you are going to run in with. Another common one is we have identified what we call as wish listing is what we call it. And this may or may not be a good example of it. Someone with a bit more background in pesticide can tell me. Right now, applicators are able to list a very large variety of chemicals. I think the largest one I've seen is applications that detail 64 different ingredients. And we know that not all 64 of those ingredients are applied. What the forester is trying to do is get as many ingredients approved as possible. so that they can later go in and decide which chemicals they actually want to apply. This was a practice that was attempted to be banned by the most recent update to the Forest Practices Act. And I think this is something that, we'll be diving into in the shortly here and seeing if that practice has been successfully curbed. We really believe that it is really important to give everyone accurate information on what chemicals are being applied near them. And we would really like to see this data be 100% precise. And that is a goal that Beyond Toxics will be striving for in as much as possible. But we do know that there are some current limitations there. You don't have to memorize everything I'm saying. Don't worry. It's all right here, spelled out in writing on our website. So if this is something you would like to view in more depth, we would highly encourage you to do that and see some of the other limitations that are involved in this data set. But really, we're really proud to be here and at this moment. And I think with that, I'll say a couple of words on what we hope to keep doing in the future with this web application, and then we'll open it up to any questions and answers that we can assist folks with here today. So this is just a start of what we envision to be a much longer term project. And really, for a lot of people who know Beyond Toxics for a long time, this actually really feels like the middle. We were involved in advocating for the legislation that created the FERNS pesticide reporting in 2014. And so now we finally arrived at a moment as an organization where some of the labor that us and many others really put in 2014, we're now able to view capaciously. So some would say this is the middle, not the beginning, and that's a fair articulation. Um, our first step was getting this data publicly accessible and available to everyone that falls in line with environmental justice standards and best practices and is really important. The other thing that we'd like to do, and I've hinted at, is start doing large-scale data analyses on this data. It is a treasure trove. There is a lot we can learn from it, and a lot of improvements that can be made to our current forestry system and widespread practice of aerial spray and pesticide sprays. This data is a really helpful tool in identifying helpful policy interventions. And if you have specific ideas on research questions or research that you envision this data being good for, we would love to hear from you and learn about that and talk about it and see if we have the capacity to help or work together on that. If you yourself are a GIS researcher and have this skill set and can start doing those types of research projects on your own, we'd love to hear from you and share this data with you. So get in touch. And then lastly, this web map is something that I think as an organization, we'd really like to continue coming back to. And so as you're using this resource and trying it out and learning what works about it and what doesn't work for you, we would love to know because it's not something we may be able to change right away, but it's something we'd like to be able to change in the future by continuing to work with folks like Infographics Lab and keep improving on this. And that really helps me and Joanna and other Beyond Toxic staff know how to assist you. So some of the feedback we've been trying to implement already, for example, is people really wanted to be able to zoom out and view a really large amount of pesticide data at once. That's something that Joanna and the students at the Infographics Lab worked on very hard today to be able to get that done and really improve that system. And so that's something you should be able to do starting now. So that's one small example of ways that we want to continue iterating on this source. I think that's all I have. I know that was a lot of talking, but I'd love to open up the floor to
And
question and answer. Yes, please.
before you get to that, there's just one more acknowledgement that I just wanted to add, especially given what Mason was saying today about, the spatial data work that it takes to get this huge amount of spatial data to load into the map. When it's working, it looks, it's working great. And um, but actually, there's all sorts of stuff that we have to do under the hood to be able to show this much data on the map successfully at once. And so I did want to return to that idea of experiential learning that we do here and give a shout out to Michael Klopotowski, who is an undergraduate student that works here in the lab that has been, with our direction here in the lab, doing a fair amount of the actual coding underneath. So I just wanted to make sure that he got a little shout out there.
I appreciate that. Yeah, Michael has been awesome and a truly talented undergraduate student to work on this project. And no thanks and no small part to Joanna as willing to be a supervisor and doing a very excellent job in that. And that kind of rounds us back to, this has been right before we get into Q&A, this has been a really wonderful project and really important in so many ways. I hope we've illustrated today. And Beyond Toxics is not able to do this work without its donors and supporters. So it is giving season, and if you're looking to give, it is my obligation as a nonprofit worker to thank you for your support. And truly, we couldn't have done something without this, without some donors who've asked to remain anonymous on this specific project. But we really like to be able to continue doing work on this. And so if you're looking to give this season, that is something that we would tremendously appreciate as an organization. You can just go to our website and you should get about 3 different pop-ups asking for you to donate. So if you're interested in doing that, it's that time of year. And thank you so much for doing that. Um, okay, so with that, let's orient this a little bit more into a conversation. I believe I should be able to see if y'all want to raise your hands and unmute and ask your question or state your curiosity or idea. Would really love to do that, and I'm open to that. And then additionally, we can open this up to the chat or Q&A, which you should be able to see at the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions or curiosities or statements, would love to hear that. And I know that Barb, I want to say it's rumor, sorry if I got it wrong, is in the chat, is asking to give examples of how this info has been able to reduce pesticide usage across the state. Um, I would just say I'm really looking forward to hopefully doing that with this data. This is the first of its kind. We've been able to get this data in this format. So we're still at the early phases and haven't quite turned to research and policy applications quite yet. We really wanted to get this out to the public first. Um, but I am here at Beyond Toxics and strongly believe in the ability of GIS and cartography as a communication tool and helping raise awareness of how much pesticide are used. Beyond Toxics published a report right around 2016, I want to say, using an initial set of FERNS data, looking at a particular watershed in the coastal range, where we were able to highlight the fact that there were a lot of pesticide applications occurring near schools and homes. And as a result of that, we were able to advocate for stronger buffer requirements, which require operators to spray applications a specific distance away from sensitive land uses like schools and homes and drinking water sources. So I think it's certainly debatable if that's reduced pesticide usage, but at minimum, it's absolutely reduced pesticide exposure for a number of folks in our water systems. And I'd really like to continue moving towards a world where we're reducing pesticide usage, and the visibility and this transparency in that data should um, be a really good step in making it towards that. Yeah, and Eric brings up a really good point in the chat, and was the primary reason we did this. Now, actually, I'm gonna let Nancy hop on and chat here for a second because I don't know, Nancy, if you know this, but it was your ask in a meeting 5 months ago that really pushed us to make this. So I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Am I unmuted now?
You
Yes.
are unmuted. We can hear
Okay.
you.
I really appreciate seeing this information and this mapping. I mean, I think there is so much spraying happening along the Oregon coast, and that is in some ways not many people know about that it's happening. And some people say me they actually spray. It seems like a shock. And so I think the more ways that we can get this information out and what ideas you have for getting this information out. And one thing I want to bring up too is that I think originally I was against aerial spray, and now I'm against both ground and aerial. There's the issue of revolatilization, and so there was one testing we did that there was big buffers and everything, and it still got into people's drinking water when someone of our group tested the water for the chemicals. But the other thing is that the ground spraying is done by hand by people without adequate protection, and even according to the Oregon Department of Agriculture, the women, and they have no respiratory protection, and they're taught to hold these heavy tanks in the hose and walk into the hose on these steep hills with no respiratory and very often no eye protection. And some of these chemicals can cause blindness. And most of these people are immigrants to our country, new people with not many rights or protections, and probably fear of their jobs actually. And so I think I feel like we really need to be combining both of those. That's my personal. But and so looking at how we get this information out, and I think this is a great step forward. So,
I really appreciate that, Nancy. And, you're so right about, you know, this question of like, is ground spray actually that much better than aerial spray? And it is absolutely, as you point out, not without its further continued risks. And you think about someone hiking uphill on steep slopes, really exerting themselves, and then having that additional belabored breathing on top of this volatilization, which for those who don't know in the chat is when a chemical is able to move from a liquid or more solid state into a gaseous state, and therefore is breathable in the general ambient air around that area. Or it can then fall and deposit in other areas depending on the chemical. So I agree. Yeah, we have our work cut out in front of us to continue raising awareness on this. And that was one of the reasons we started looking to this data at a large scale was this question of, is aerial spray still a thing? Was actually one of the guiding research questions that got us into it. Like, how common is that versus ground spraying still? And it still seems like it's really common. And that'll be one of the analyses we hop into the new year is to see how these patterns of application have changed. And then hopefully that informs us on next steps. Barb has a great question. And Nancy, while we have you here, I'm wondering if you might be able to I actually maybe offer a little bit more insight into this than us, or if Jennifer, you're available and able to hop in the chat and know a couple other organizations. Barb is asking which nonprofits like North Coastal Communities for Watershed Protection or Water Watch are using this in order to test stream water for pesticides and wells. Um, it's a great question. I have an additional thought I want to throw out there in conjunction with that. But Nancy, if you have any answers, would appreciate that.
so one is that this would be what we were talking with Kara Micah is to fold into this information data on where people's water sources are, whether they're water rights or municipalities, and then coordinate that with the sprays. are happening. And the other thing is like actual testing of the water with these chemicals is really expensive. Like with one application there, someone's home was $7,000. And so it'd be really great to be able to overlay. And I think it's shocking to see how much, and people are afraid of. And then someone else was talking to me recently if we could do epidemiology studies related to this mapping too, to see there's people in our communities that are afraid of increased cancer rates, and a lot of that is not being tracked, and there's no air monitoring. And I remember Oregon Health Authority said to me 15 years ago, you're more likely to be exposed by breathing the air from these sprays than you are even from drinking the water. And there's no monitoring. So I think there's maybe this is also a way of lobbying for more air monitoring, more water monitoring. And I also think that if we could have, like with Beyond Toxics, like a media campaign to get this information out. And
Well, funny you should say. I think we have a couple of reporters in the chat tonight. So hopefully we've made one small step towards that outcome. Yeah, agreed. All of that and more. Again, so a lot of different directions we're hoping to take this analysis in the future, and whether that's looking into more epidemiology, seeing if there's a correlation between certain incidences of diseases or human health outcomes, and if that can be is correlable to spray rates. And as Nancy's identifying, measuring and thinking about exposure is really hard and can be a little challenging. And that kind of gets us into, I think, one more important limitation of the data. Whoops, sorry about that. One more limitation of the data is you'll notice, we don't have 2025 on here. And that's because it does take a serious amount of labor to translate each year's data and bring it together and then display it on this map. So another reason for donations, hopefully. But this is something that, we really want to work on, is making this more quickly and readily available. And that'll be another one of the things that we can continue working on. Alan Torres is asking, do you know any good resources to learn more about the pesticides listed in the map and their potential harms? Um, you know, Jennifer, my lovely coworker, if you're out there, I'm curious what resources you typically use to look into that. Someone else put a EPA database for specific labels in the chat. And I've also looked at the Agency of Toxic Disease Registry, ATSDR, which has some of these chemicals in there, and you can quickly look at health effects. And Jennifer recommended PANA in the chat. And then Alan, if there's any specific questions you have about those, please get in touch with us. And we're always here to help, and same thing with other folks. Yeah. Well, with that, unless I see any um, people arriving last minute, I think I'll end us with one question, which was, how do I share this webinar and this wonderful information I just learned? And perhaps this is of particular relevance. Cassie, we're so glad you're here, but I'm afraid you've missed the party. But don't worry, this is not your only chance to find out about this information. We'll be uploading this webinar to our YouTube channel and making that available on our website, likely on the same web page as this map itself, so that we can have this tutorial and information about this map available in the same place. and we will be 100% sure to get in contact with you. Everyone who's registered for this webinar will get an email with a link to the recording and a link to the map itself. So all of that information should be really easily accessible and readily available to you. Um, Give us a couple of days to do that, and you should hear from us by Friday at the latest with all of this information and resources. Um, with that, appreciate the love in the chat and the excitement around this. It's our pleasure. And Nancy, I just saw you raised your hand again if you want to end us on another note.
That was an accident. But I just wanted to say I think it's a miracle this is happening. So thank you.
You're so welcome. Thanks for the wonderful idea and ask from us. And yeah, thank you again, Joanna and the Infographics Lab for all the hard work you did on this. It's it's gorgeous and really exciting.
We're glad to take part, and also for us to thank you for the accolades in here and that we're seeing here in the chat, and really looking forward to working on next iterations of this and future other ways that we can help make maps and tell your data stories.
Awesome. Yeah, and with that, you want to get in contact with us, just go to the webpage, ask us questions. We'd love to hear more from you if we weren't able to hear from you tonight or at a later time. So that's why this is here. And thanks so much, everyone, for taking the time here to be this evening. We'll go ahead and wrap it up and end the recording, and I'll end the meeting in just a second.